Okay, I think we are at time, so we will get started. I do want to take the moment to just acknowledge that I am living, working, and playing on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Coast Salish people. I'm incredibly grateful to be on this land. I also encourage you to take a moment to visit the Indian Residential School Survivors Society's website. Take time to educate yourself, and if you can, to donate. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Lauren. So I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to be quiet now. So it's all yours.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And I am going to share as we practiced. Are we good? Do we see it?
Yes, it's good.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you so much. My name is Lauren Ritchie. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I currently live and work on the unceded traditional territory of the Tsuut'ina, Blackfoot, and Nakota territory, now known as Calgary, Alberta. But today I'm very honored and excited to be to be presenting. I have a friend here. To be presenting on the unceded traditional territory of Squamish, Sioux, Tsleil-Waututh. There it is. This is new for me. The Musqueam First Nations and the Coast Salish peoples, currently known as Vancouver, British Columbia. So I'm not presenting from home today. My background is primarily dancing. And so I have had a 20-year career teaching dance and about 10 years of incorporating mental skills into dance and sport. I call this the Me Search research. If you haven't watched Katie's presentation from earlier today, Amy and I were having such a good chuckle about it because I felt like it was dedicated to me, and Amy felt the same, and so many other people resonated with that work. And so, as a former professional athlete and artist, there's obviously so much that we get to unpack and recognize within our training and our development. And this is where I believe deeply and profoundly in the power of coaches and the kind of environments that we create and the kind of role model that we can be in every stage and age, no matter if we train really recreational young dancers, athletes, children, and then all the way up. So my goal has always been to be my best and help others be their best. And we had a great conversation in Amy's values presentation, even around what it means to be the best versus my best. And so this is largely inspired by some of the values conversation we had. So today we're going to talk about a line, a location, a few elephants, a stream, what I call today's top 5, and then your tastiest recipe. So it's a bit of a mix, and I'm excited to get into it. It is inspired by and a continuation of, in some respects, to Amy's presentation earlier this week. I will do a little bit of a recap for those who didn't join us, but it is really on the importance and the recognition of exploring our values and getting really clear on our internal compass, how we want to filter and focus and prioritize our world. And the whole goal here is that we are actually practicing living and speaking and showing up in our values, which requires a level of consciousness. So how am I defining consciousness? Because I've done different conscious coaching certifications and teachings, but we can often get a little pop culture-y with the word and maybe even not have it defined well. So this is where I'm just calling it the quality or the state of being aware, especially of something within ourself. And the consciousness that I am talking about is largely the process of going inwards and doing self-reflection just to see what is there. It offers a pause. It offers us to come back to a state of calm so we can think just clearly and more openly. We want to be practicing reflections. And then really that's what starts to open up the creativity and see new opportunities, new paths, new ways of doing things. And this is essentially going to help combat what I call, ignorance, both within ourselves and also the athletes that we do teach and instruct. So for me, consciousness offers less blind spots and less friction. It's going to actually make our jobs easier in a lot of respects. So this is actually something that I did, and I didn't know it was an exercise, but I did it naturally. And then I saw somebody, essentially teach this little prompt. While I'm talking, I encourage you, if you have a pen and paper, maybe draw a line, a little squiggly down, and on the left side, take notes, right? It's like noting down the things that are up on the screen, things that I'm saying. And on the right side, it kind of goes through our internal filter of making notes of how you relate to something that is being said, or perhaps there's an opportunity there. And even if I say something that you strongly disagree with, cool, make notes. What about that do you not agree with? Or what about that sort of feels funny? This is an awesome way to really start to use our lens and even pull at some of that consciousness that we have within us. So take notes and make notes. This is a video that I will share. Amy had shared it in her values work, but because we're going to be speaking about this, I thought let's do a little recap.
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks. www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question, we are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, Where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
So that is such a great tight video to capture what we're talking about when we're talking about this conscious leadership above and below the line. And when I started to think about this presentation in particular, I have my own experiences in the dance world through a variety of coaches and professional bosses and leaders. But I wanted to really tap into what are some of the other experiences of athletes and maybe even some universal trends that we're noticing. And one of the things around below the line coaching is that we even the best coaches in the world, the ones that we like love the most and had the great impact, we can waver and go up and down, and it's not like you are one or the other. And so I'm going to share a few stories from me being a coach where I just got it wrong, or I slipped below the line, or I sort of didn't know I was below the line. And that's the beautiful thing about consciousness, is there's always this openness to learning. I'm going to share my Instagram stories because I posted on my Instagram just what are some of the habits, the characteristics, the qualities of your quote unquote worst coach, or a less than ideal, not one that you jive with. And then what were some of the qualities and the characteristics of the great ones? And this is where I find it is complicated and it's nuanced. I had a conversation with a hockey player. He was talking about a coach who, by today's standards, was emotionally abusive. And yet he felt really conflicted because it was also the best coach that he ever had, or the one that he felt like he grew the most with. And as I continued to dig, it was also the coach that he modeled his coaching after when he stepped into that role. And so he goes, I know with certainty so many players didn't thrive in that environment. And I know with certainty that today it would not fly. And yet there was so much good. And I became sort of who I am today in large part because of him. And so this is where it's like we're holding the both and space. It's like we can be below the line and also do remarkable things above the line. I was witness to many times where people would get blamed for losing the game or losing the competition. It was like, you're the reason, that move, that thing, which always hurt my heart. And also, we know that coaches are some of the most powerful role models in young athletes' lives. And sometimes they'll listen to what their coach says more than their parent. And coaches shape human beings. And so there's such beauty in that role. It's kind of the both and. So here are the poll results from Instagram. This was below the line. They cared more about getting to their goal than me. I love this one. Yelled all the time. I've had a conversation recently about yelling because I'm a bit of a yeller, and I'm going, who am I yelling for? And sometimes it's just out of straight enthusiasm. And I really do think sometimes I'm like, I'm yelling for me. Like they can't even hear me. And so just these moments of awareness of who is yelling helping right now. The sarcastic comment was interesting for me because that one showed up a few times in regards to perhaps coaches thinking that they're covering some of this with humor. And they saw straight through it. It was hurtful and harmful. My friend who's with me here today, hers is the cigarettes and canes. So yes, at one time, dance instructors were smoking in class and had canes to sort of put you in your place. So obviously these are below the line moments. I was told I would never succeed and I should quit trying. When teachers obviously have favorites and you never have a chance to be seen. So the above the line, which are just as important, came out as engaged, authentic, always corrected the mistakes and taught us how to fix it. They gave us the tools. She saw my strengths and spoke to that. Honest, patient, transparent, always knew where you stood, right? These are beautiful things, all possible, all doable. So here's that line and the location that I was talking about. We are always being offered a moment to say, okay, here's the line. Am I above it or am I below it? And these are some of the questions that you can even ask. Am I attached to my goal or their growth? Do I feel curious or judgmental? And then, so happy to see Katie talk about the inner narrative. What does my inner narrative sound like? What is that story that I'm weaving in my mind? And it is nuanced because we might have a very clear goal that we need to get to. As a dance educator, we're hitting the stage. The piece has to be tight and clean and professional and prepared. So there is a timeline, there is a deadline, there is that performance aspect. But the below the line coaching is making it about you. And I've done this, especially as a young choreographer. That's my dance, that's my name that they're putting on stage, right? And I have to sit and watch it, but my name's attached. And when we get caught up in that spiral, we're missing the opportunities of, okay, what do they actually need for us to get where we need to be? Or what am I missing? And we had a great conversation recently around, rather than screaming like, get to your spot, it's that pause and just saying, what's preventing you from getting there? Like what's getting in your way? What's not working? And so we're invited to sort of hold up the mirror and do that with ourselves. Am I attached to my goal or the growth? So these are the lovely elephants. These are the elephants that when I talk about conscious coaching, I know and accept that in the room full of educators or coaches, there might be some resistance. Just, the skeptics, that I tried something once and it didn't work, those kind of pieces. And so I feel like let's just talk about them. So the first one is, as a coach, I do know more. I know more than them. Listen to what I'm saying. And this is where it's not about what you're saying or what you know. It's about how you're sharing it. So it's not about the what, it's about the how and how we're approaching it. I don't have time. I don't have time to do this. And we will be real and say that, yeah, it takes some time to sit and reflect on a practice or a game or a particular relationship with an athlete and go, what's not working here? What am I missing? What are some of the cracks? How am I showing up in this? Yeah, it does take some time. And I always say that you don't have time not to do this, because this is where loyalty, buy-in, community, and teamwork, this is where respect and trust is built. So the idea that we're just sort of going to push through and we'll just make them listen, or just hold so firmly just to do it my way, and my way is the right way, yeah, we get in some really tricky spots. I relate it at times to driving with the emergency brake on. We all know the feeling of stepping on the gas and you just feel this like, and it's just, there's friction. Taking that moment to explore some of these questions and really sit with yourself as a leader and look at your approach and all the beautiful things that sort of come with leading a room, a team, a group. We don't have time not to do it, because it will fundamentally shift how we grow and how we change course. I'm in charge and we need a strong leader. Yes. And there's also many different types of leadership, right? You have like the authoritative, you have the coach based, you have the laissez-faire, sort of this hands off. If you Google leadership styles, some people have 8, some people have 12, but we know there's many different ways to be a leader. And so if we're sort of stuck in one specific type of leadership, the do what I say, or the laissez-faire, like we'll just have you guys figure it out, you're going to see some results. That your style of leadership will always show in the results. And so yes, you are in charge, and there's different forms of leadership. My favorite. This is how I was coached, right? Dominique Kelly, a peer of mine, gave me such a great quote with the good old days were not good for everyone. And when you only model and only coach the way that you were coached, even if it was successful, you have blind spots, right? There's blind spots there that you're missing that could make you even more powerful or even more connected to your athletes. And then this is letting the next generation be soft, entitled, or in control. There is nothing harder and braver than exploring your feelings, your emotions, these things that cause reactions in your body. There's nothing harder and braver. And we know this because if emotions were easy, we would just roll through them and flow through them. Wouldn't perhaps need therapy, right? Like, this is hard work for ourselves and for them. It is not about letting them be soft. And entitled, this is a tricky word because I've seen it thrown out more in the past few years than ever. And I like to consider it a bit like a pendulum, where there is a certain level of entitlement that can happen. And I think it can happen at any stage or any age or with any athlete, or even with any coach, where you're expecting something without putting in the work. Okay, that's fine. That's a version of entitlement. But what I see at times, and especially with women in sport, they are asking for a safe place to train and to be treated with respect. That's not entitlement. And if you feel like certain requests from athletes are them being entitled, that's the moment that we pause and we reflect and we consider their point of view and we just take a moment and we ask more questions. Because just to label it as entitlement, we know with 100% certainty, even watching all of the March Madness down in the spring about what the women basketball players were given as a training room, that is not entitlement. That is a request to be treated fairly and equally and with respect. So the entitlement word is like a little asterisk for me anytime I hear it. And then in control, this is the reminder that it is never, as a coach, in my opinion, it is never us versus them. We are in this together. It's not a tug of war of power. We are the ones that set boundaries. We set the standards. We set the expectations. And yet we can also do our best to make sure that they're giving everything that they need to grow and to take it and to flourish. But this isn't the battle of control. Clearly, we're the leader. And then this is the upstream portion I was talking about. And there's a great book called Upstream. I think it's Dan Heath. And when he was talking about a lot of community initiatives, even some healthcare initiatives. But as he was talking about it, I was like, I feel that. Doing mental skills work and doing the conscious coaching approach, we are actually trying to prevent things from happening. So I'm sure many of you know the story. You're having a picnic beside a river with your friend and a child floats by. So you jump in the river, you pull them out, bring them to safety, and you look and there's another child and you're jumping in the river and pulling, and then all of a sudden there's all these children, you're jumping and you're pulling and you're saving, and your friend starts to leave and walk up river and you go, "Where are you going? We have to save all these children." And they go, "I'm going upstream to see who's throwing children in the river," right? There's this upstream thing that's happening. And so when we look at some of the below the line stories or the more negative coaching stories and experiences, we're trying to prevent that. We don't want people leaving with eating disorders. We don't want people to have the story that they were never seen, heard, or respected. And by doing conscious coaching, we're sort of going upstream so that we can create the healthiest, most powerful, most positive environments and relationships. It's really hard to prove that somebody didn't get an eating disorder, right? And it's never going to be Instagram worthy to show what didn't happen. It can be very tricky to measure. And yet we know by connecting in with our values and understanding the position of power that we hold, that this is the absolute highest work that we do. So I say that with the full acknowledgement that I feel like so much of my work, it's like, it's not going viral on social media, right? And it's still worthy and worth it. So this is where we talk about today's top 5. Now, the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership is the video. It's a book, and the group is the video that we showed. So I think they have 15. There are many different ways that we can cut, discuss, talk about all the components of conscious leadership. But when I sat down and thought about my personal stories and the ones that felt really worthy of sharing that were shared with me, I picked 5. And I think that they cover a really big range. And the first one is radical responsibility. And when we look at the term radical, it's extreme, countercultural. When I look at how certain sports, what the norm is on the standards of coaching, the language of coaching, the behavior of coaching, to consciously coach could be considered extreme and countercultural. It could be radical. To take responsibility is to take accountability, the opportunity to act independently and recognize you are responsible for you. That's it. Considering what radical responsibility is and is not, I got pulled into essentially blame culture. And this is where we can actually learn a lot through what we know and sort of doesn't work. So I'm going to pull up there's a deep set of research that shows that people who blame others for their mistakes lose status, learn less, perform worse relative to those who own up to their mistakes. So there's research by Nathaniel Fast and Larissa Tidens, and they actually talk about how blaming is contagious. And so when we're considering how we speak and how we frame and view working with the athletes or the story that we make up about a certain team, if we are blaming them, guess where the blaming is coming from? The top. And you'll watch it bleed out, and athletes will start blaming each other or blaming the ref or it's contagious. And so there was a moment where one of my friends shared her coaching moment where she recognized that she was not taking 100% responsibility for the room. It was Saturday morning at 9 a.m. with recreational teens. Whew, yeah, we're going to take a moment here, because as a young teacher and as a young coach, we don't get to slide into the pros or the pre-professional elite athletes. It's like we get the little nuggets or the recreational team, and we're told, okay, start practicing your coaching. So already she's feeling like there's not a lot of mentorship and she doesn't have a lot of tools as a young teacher. Mentorship and coaching, that will be another presentation. But so she's showing up at 9 a.m. with really teenagers who just kind of want to probably hang out together, listen to cool music, do a couple of moves. But she herself was a high performing dancer. And so she's holding that standard and that expectation. And so of course she's wanting them to dig in and give more, and she's just feeling like they're not getting it. And then the frustration starts to rise, which we know that's you're starting to creep below the line. And there's this frustration, and she says goodbye to them at the end of the class, just sort of almost like a dismissive, just, okay, well, guess I'll see you next week. And she watches 2 of the dancers leave, shoulder slunched, head down, just defeated. And that was a moment where she had to take 100% responsibility for the climate that she created in the room and how she was showing up in the room, because that was how people were leaving her class. And that was the joy of dance that she was passing on to kids who just really wanted to enjoy it and just, learn a new skill. We, as the coaches, we want to be the thermostat and not the thermometer. We set the tone, we set the temperature, we set the focus through words, through body language, through it all. And to recognize that we hold the position as the climate engineer is to then take 100% responsibility for how your practice and how your class operates and what that looks like and the kind of energy created. So here are a few questions that you can ask yourself, and I can send this deck to Amy afterwards, so you don't need to write down furiously, or you can take a screenshot. But even in those moments where things are going great, or maybe things are super frantic and frustrating, just what do you notice in your body? Because your body is going to speak even faster than your thoughts. And so I know for me, when I've given a correction or a cue or feedback, and then the dancer does not fix it, like there was no application of the feedback, there's like a burning in my chest. I can feel a little ragey, right? I can feel that. And so just that in and of itself, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. That is not needed for a pointed toe, right? Like perspective. What am I focusing on or believing in the moment? This is where are you believing that they never fix the corrections? See, there it is again, right? Is there a story around this from the past this reminds me of? Or even I keep this issue going by. And this is 100% my responsibility. So if I keep repeating the same feedback or the same cue, point your feet. Point your feet. On that part, point your feet. That foot isn't pointed. Okay. If it's not landing the first or second time, I'm keeping this frustration going. Let's try it a new way. Let's give a new, mental imagery moment. Let's reapproach. Let's have them talk it through and explain it to me. Like, I need to take responsibility if something's not landing or working the way I think it should. So the second top 5 is integrity. And integrity and radical responsibility, they kind of hug up like sisters, right? They can be attached. And this is also integrity within self and integrity with those around you. And so integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. That's where integrity is one of my top values. And so when I'm looking at being integral with myself and others, I kind of go to this: am I being honest? Am I living within my morals and my values? Are my values aligned? Thoughts, words, actions, right? Integrity is the state of being whole. State of being whole. Everything is nice and connected. So from a personal standpoint, I believe every coach could, I'd invite you to have a roadmap as a bit of a guide and a check-in. So this is when you're starting to reflect on the type of coach you are becoming as you live fully in your values-based perspective. So everybody, no matter what sport, no matter what experience, has the opportunity for growth, the coaches and the athletes. For me, my best coaching came when I reconnected in with my values and started to have daily practices and habits that supported those. And so this could be everything from as simple as a consistent journaling practice to consistent stillness and breath work. I don't know if anyone has read Ryan Holiday's The Stillness is the Key. Amy recommended it too. It's brilliant. I have done anything that I can. So this is including recording my own classes and then having to take my class. You learn a lot about yourself. It takes a moment to get over your own voice. To video class and notice where I'm standing, where my eyes are going, perhaps We've done an exercise where we even had to track compliments to feedback and what that ratio looks like, because I was definitely trained. I don't really remember any compliments. Like, it was a lot of the critical feedback. There might have been, but the ratio definitely wasn't a 4-to-1 situation. So I had a good laugh in my master's program, probably right beside Amy, when one of the teachers says, yes, the ratio should be 4-to-1. And I thought it was 4 corrections to 1 compliment or encouragement. Yeah. I have a dancer beside me. So that's like proof, right? That, yeah, 4 corrections, 1 compliment. No, it's supposed to be the other way. So this is where, can we look at how we show up as a coach? Can we actually start to track and see, are my coaching behaviors, is my coaching language in alignment with my values? And then this one I loved. I believe this is the 15, inspired by the 15 commitments of conscious leadership. But let your intentions and your agreements be clear. Let them be kept. If they aren't working, let them be renegotiated. And then clean up any mess. You know, when you're out of integrity, when something didn't go as planned, like, own it. And I love this one because we all we want to know where we stand. We want to know what our coach sees in us and for us. My husband had an experience in university football where he had a coach say, if you do this, and if you do that, and if you do this, that you'll be in this starting position next season. So just like, dig down, dig deep. And then whispers that through the grapevine that they've recruited somebody else for that position. And so all of that trust and belief in integrity from his coaches was gone. It was gone. You're telling me I'm going to have it, and you actually went out and recruited somebody else for it. So now what? So now where do I stand? And what breaks my heart around hearing some of my husband's stories is that he didn't play those sports again. Once he walked away from some of those experiences, he had a couple different sports. He wasn't following the long-term athletic development model, right? There wasn't sort of this joy and fun and nostalgia within those games. He also participated in 0 alumni events. And often we hear about, creating and building the sport alumni and having that community. I mean, all it takes is a couple of gnarly coaches and you've lost that athlete, you've lost that future supporter. So being clear, keeping them, and I'm all about like, hey, if we owe somebody an apology, if we did not show up the way that we needed to, I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. I did it once in a studio out in Ontario because I was a guest instructor. It was a new situation. It was an interesting dynamic of like half the class really listening and being connected, and then the other half sort of just chatting amongst themselves, even after I'm doing various tasks to bring them back in. And so I had a moment where I think I just went below the line, and I was like, hey, like, we're in class, let's go. That's the 5th time I've asked for it. And that felt really gross, and part of it felt weird. So at the end, I actually said, I'm sorry, that is not how I want to show up. I was frustrated. This is how it came out. I don't think they had ever seen an adult apologize. And I'm okay with that. But cleaning up our mess, very important. And your results will be your evidence. So if there isn't that relationship being built, if there isn't that cohesion, if there isn't that development that you're hoping for, let's go and actually look at the results as data. So, and then take 100% responsibility and use it as an opportunity to get into integrity within our own practicing and performances. So here's some of the questions that are offered up. What's preventing me from staying truthful or integral? What's the cost of not being integral, not telling the truth, not being honest with ourselves? What do my values look like when I prioritize them for myself in practice, in competition or a game, one-on-one? All reflection moments, right? This is probably one of my favorite ones. The next two I think are my favorites. So curiosity. It's the desire to learn. Best quote ever. I'm here to get it right, not to be right. Brene Brown. And I love that because there are moments in coaching where we really think we are right or we have it right. And yet for some reason it's not working, or what worked in the past is no longer working. And so really this is the grounds to anchor ourselves in that curiosity. And with the curiosity, there's a few stories, some wins and some losses. There was a moment when I was teaching a jazz class, and this is where I see the same group of kids. I have seen them for many years. I know in general what their ability is, what their energy levels are at, all of that stuff. And I went into class, well, jazzed, right? Like I was ready to work. I have that high achievement, high performance mentality. So I like to take our training time and like go guns a-blazing. And one of the students who normally was that same kind of energy, you know, fiery, wanted that personal development, I was pushing, I was encouraging, I was like on her, right? We're in this. And she ended up leaving the class at the end crying. And I was like, what did I miss? And essentially she had a really, really hard day at school, right? They bring school right into practice. And rather than saying, hey, are you okay? On a scale of 1 to 10, where's our energy at today? Rather than doing just like a 20-second check-in, I just kept yelling and kept driving and kept, you know, believing in my enthusiasm. So there was a moment of curiosity missed there. And sometimes curiosity can be that quick, right? It's just, hey, checking in, scale of 1 to 10, or I'm noticing this. You okay? Okay, great. I also have a student who we have in dance a retire, right? You bring your knee up along your supporting leg, kind of like a little flamingo. I know he thinks he's doing it right. I wholeheartedly believe he believes he's doing it, and yet he's not in the correct position. And so rather than, there was probably a couple of times where I was saying, pull your knee up, pull your knee in, think about it going to the opposite hip, thinking about it opposite shoulder. We were trying to get creative, different cues, different images, all of those good things. And then me actually asking him, what are you focusing on and what are you feeling? How do you, when you're in that position, what muscles do you feel really activating? And it was through that we could actually get a little deeper into, oh, okay, so it's this part that we need to adjust. Or rather than pulling, because he was pulling the knee over, but so much, he's an overachiever, right? So much that it's going too far. And it's like, okay, we got to think of bringing both in together, like creatively finding solutions simply from me asking him some questions, because my cues were no longer working or getting the results I was desiring. There's also, from sort of the darker side, there was a story about an athlete who they had been practicing a certain, you know, run or drill, and they get in, and it's one where you kind of do a bait and switch, right? Like a little, just kidding. We don't really have those in dancing. So I'm sure there's a better way of describing it, but it was like, they think you're going to, you know, that you're pulling them left and then you're going to go right. And the other team had seen them do it once and then wasn't falling for it. And so this athlete goes to do this, and all of a sudden the person didn't follow them and they were no longer sure what to do. And sure enough, they get reamed out on the sideline. They get blamed in front of the whole team that's the reason they lost. And even hearing the athlete describe it now, there was almost like a panic or a franticness, because it was like, I didn't know what to do. We hadn't practiced if they didn't follow or believe me. Like, and it was remarkable that even, I don't know, 20 years later, this athlete still felt a sense of just, if somebody would have just asked me what went wrong, I would have said the guy didn't follow and I didn't know what to do. But it was just the lack of curiosity and sort of that need to shame and blame, which in sports sometimes happens publicly, which is, it's really tricky. And so when we're talking about curiosity, I put in a little exclamation point, tone matters, because you'll notice I could read these questions with different tones. They'll have very different responses. But when I'm working with an athlete or a dancer, I'm genuinely curious, what are you focusing on? Like, if what I'm saying is not working, or if I'm not getting the result I want as the coach, like, what are you focusing on? And then what do you hear when I say this? I remember teaching something in a warm-up, like in stretch. I'd used the same cue for years, and finally one of the dancers pops her head up and is like, I don't understand what that means. And I was just like, and there goes 10 years of using a cue that doesn't work. And I'm so thankful she said something. But, what do you hear when I say this? What do you see? And versus what I see, right? So we can also see how, if you took a harsh tone, what are you focusing on could be quite a bit. But curiosity, right? And even when it comes to yourself, what happens when I change my focus? I used that one a lot, because it went from, really driving in deep into like feet and ankles and knees and a specific technical position and a technical transition. And I was like, what happens when I look at their head or their upper body or their eye focus? And all of a sudden I'm getting more information, but I just had to realize, I was like, what am I focusing on? I was like, yeah, I'm like narrowing my focus. I got to pull out. How can I amplify my values right now? And that's an opportunity given to us in every single moment, in sport, out of sport. Every single moment is an opportunity for you to connect back in with your values and turn up the volume. Where could I work less and achieve more? Right? Where could I delegate? What does asking for help look like? What is my body telling me? Katie nailed this one this morning, when we have trained ourselves at times to like bypass and ignore that pain marker or that feeling that we're feeling, because we are pushing through discomfort. And yet the truth is, our body is one of the most powerful tools of information. And it's the meat suit that's going to get our soul work done, right? And so if you're feeling certain ailments, if you're constantly feeling tired or stressed or whatever that is, like, your body is telling you, it is talking to you. And if you do not listen, it'll just turn up the volume. We know those pieces. And then what does video feedback look like? Yeah, I had to ask myself, what does video feedback look like? This one, I feel candid communication. I feel like it could also say courageous, because sometimes candid communication can require that feeling of vulnerability. Honesty without kindness is brutality. Kindness without honesty is manipulation. Say it one more time. Honesty without kindness is brutality. If you are just yelling and screaming and just hammering without a sense of kindness, like, that is just brutality. And kindness without honesty is manipulation. So this is where another favorite quote of all time: clear is kind. Yeah. Being clear is being kind. And good old Oprah, she shares a moment in one of her, I'm sure it was the Super Soul session or whatnot, where she says, it doesn't matter if it's Beyonce or Obama. Everybody at the end of an interview sort of turns and looks at her and says, is that good? Is that okay? right? So we all have this feeling of wanting to be validated, to be valued, just that check-in. I was stopped in my tracks when one of my friends shared that they had a coach who kept talking about the it factor, right? And this coach was very clear and very obvious about who he believed had it and who didn't. And it was actually a division of where he put his time and his attention. And unfortunately for my friend, he did not get put in the it group, and said it was the most toxic form of neglect he's ever experienced. And I mean, we all know that piece around being shut out, not seen, not acknowledged, not even like almost given up on. I don't know if there's anything worse at times, right? If you're just flat out ignored. And this is also a little bit of the Pygmalion effect, right? They did that research, and they told one of the teachers, like, oh, these kids are gifted, and these kids, ooh, they really struggle. There was no truth in it, but they kind of planted those seeds in the teacher. And then, of course, at the end of the year, shockingly, these kids had better marks than those kids, and there was no truth in it. It was the teacher and the coach's own bias and perception. And so this idea made me pause and really go, okay, how have I done that? Or where have I done that? Or what does that look like in my class? I never would want somebody to feel neglected or ignored or given up on. And the reality is we do have stronger relationships with some athletes than others, but that everybody deserves to be valued. Everybody deserves that chance. The candid communication, I'm like, oh, gulp, because this is not one of my finest moments, but it can also be included with, there was a rehearsal, there was 4 dancers in the studio, I was in the corner, it wasn't my routine, I didn't choreograph it, it wasn't my thing, but I'm in the studio and I'm their technique teacher. And so they're running it. I did not like what I was seeing, like just not up to standards. I didn't say anything. I didn't yell. I didn't explode. And that night, there were emails from parents. Why? My face. We probably have acknowledged that I'm a little animated. There are times where literally I don't know I'm making a face. I wish I did. But that was one of those moments where clearly my face had my thoughts written all over it. And those kids felt so upset because they could tell how much I rejected what I was seeing. And so this is where candid communication isn't just language. It's not just vocals and tone. It's quite literally our energy and our presence. And I had to check myself. I still have to check myself with my face. It's just my burden.
Masks are great.
Masks were great. All right, so some questions. What conversation am I avoiding? What's the conversation you don't want to have? Who am I giving up on that deserves more respect and support? Am I meeting them where they are at? And that's such a huge part of this consciousness piece, right? Is meeting them where they're at, not where you think they should be, or not in a tone or in a language or in a leadership style where you think they should. It's like, let's meet them where they're at, give them information that actually lands. Maybe we want to give them, a 10-pound block of information and that just crushes them. And it's our job to go, here's 1 pound. See you next week for your 2 pounds, right? We know that. It's the mastery of coaching. And this last one is the real talk recipe. And this is about taking 100% responsibility for our well-being as a human being. Dr. Michael Gervais has 4 of these pillars, if you will, but this is the eat well, sleep well, think well, move well, and connect well. So the eat well is obvious. We need to take care of our bodies in order for them to function at their best and for us to function at our highest. So this is food and hydration. Most that know me, I'm constantly reminding people to drink water. Most of us are dehydrated. Sleep well. I could actually put rest well. Seven Types of Sacred Rest is a book, but this is essentially talking about, it's not just that we need to like lay down and not move to rest. There's creative rest, there's spiritual rest, mental rest, emotional rest. There's different kinds of rest, and we need to constantly check in and notice what we need. Thinking well is managing our own thoughts and perspectives. Our gratitude practice, which is one of the most researched and well-maintained set of research around cultivating and creating health and well-being from a mental space, is at the end of every night, writing the 3 things down that you're grateful for, what caused them, and why. And then straight up time management and stress. I have a friend who works with many corporate professionals in the coaching side, and they'll talk about how work is too overwhelming and they have too much on their plate. And when you actually get them to do a time management log and matrix, not using their time well, right? And we have to own that. This is our schedule. We all get that 24 hours in a day. And does it look the same for everyone? No. And that's where we get to own what we have and the resources that we have. Move well. It's important that we move, even if it's walking. We're working with athletes. We probably were athletes. Let's honor our bodies and everything that they've done for us. And then this is one that I've added: connect well. Connect well with your spirits, with your own energy and essence, and connect well with your community. And it's something we've learned through the pandemic, is just the power of community, but also the fragility of it if we do not nurture it and maintain it. So this is where all of the conscious coaching, all of the values-based thoughts, words, and actions, all of the conscious leadership, we need a strong foundation. We need a healthy place to practice. And that's essentially the recipe. And Amy had mentioned as well that there's an opportunity to create your coaching philosophy and your personal manifesto as you look through the values-based lens, as you do some personal coaching audits. These are all things that will help support you and allow you to move through your coaching mastery and your coaching practice. So Amy, I'm gonna wrap it up there because I know we are on the 1 hour mark. If there's any questions, I'm happy to stay back a little longer. If you have to hop off right at 2 o'clock, I totally understand. I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to be given to speak, to connect with so many coaches of like minds, and to really continue this conversation, because I do believe that this is the way that coaching is headed for the most powerful and impactful and healthy experiences in sport.